Hey everyone, this is Tenitria Williams, and welcome back to Minding My Mental Health. This is Thursday at 12 p.m. Central Standard Time, where we are here talking about mental health. Today, we're actually going to do our Q&A. I know that we typically have a guest on, but once a month, I try to do a Q&A, which allows our viewers to submit their questions, and I'm going to answer those from a professional standpoint to give some feedback. You guys know what I want you to do. I want you to hashtag live if you are watching this live, and hashtag replay if you are watching the replay. You're going to know that you're watching it live because it'll actually have the word live on the top. If it doesn't have live at the top, you're watching the replay. That's okay. Hashtag replay. But in both of those situations, I want you to let us know where you are watching from. I'm actually going to share this, which is what I want you to do. I want you to share this broadcast to any groups that you are a part of, that you have access to share it to your stories, tag a friend, tag family members, tag, again, people that you know could benefit from having some questions answered for Minding My Mental Health. So I'm, again, so excited. And we're going to just start with a couple announcements. The first announcement is that I am hosting a free webinar on November the 10th. And we're talking about moving from surviving to thriving. And we're going to talk about how you do that and some mindsets to overcome to move from surviving to thriving. It's free. I'm going to make sure that I put the website in our comment section so you can do that. You also can go on my page and let me know. I see a couple people jumping on. Make sure you hashtag live. Let us know where you're watching from. Again, also, if you are watching on Facebook, can you put put the word Facebook or FB in the comment section? If you're watching from YouTube, let me know that you are watching from YouTube. So if you have any questions that you forgot to submit or didn't submit or that come up as you're watching this, please shoot me an inbox, or you can put it in the comments if you don't mind your name being attached to it. And I will answer those questions for you. Okay. So we want to get this Q&A started. I have some great questions. I'm really excited about answering these questions. I appreciate everybody. Again, make sure you're hashtagging everything from, your friends, hashtag Minding My Mental Health, share. Hey, Brenda from Las Vegas. Welcome, welcome, welcome. You're watching from Facebook. Again, if you're watching, let us know where you're watching from. I want to give people a few minutes to jump on because these really are some amazing questions, and I want people to have the opportunity to get the answer to those. And again, if you have questions, make sure that you shoot me a message on Messenger and let me know. Okay. So let's start with the very first question. So the very first question we have, and I'd never read the names of these questions. So if you have a question and you're a little bit embarrassed or you don't want anybody to know that don't worry, I won't read your name in the question. I'll just read your question. So the first question was, how do you create boundaries with your children, no matter how old they are, no matter their age, without coming off as mean? So that first question says, how do you create boundaries with your kids regardless of their age? So the first thing I would say is when you're talking, and then the last part of that question was without coming off mean. The first thing I want to say is that tone is really important when we're talking to anybody, not just our kids, but anybody, right? And so tone is important when we're establishing boundaries as it relates to how the message is received or how it comes across. However, what I would say about this is state your boundaries as rules, or state your boundaries on the front end rather than being reactionary. So state boundaries as a rule rather than a reaction, meaning if you continue to be disrespectful, I'm going to take your phone, right? That is establishing on the front end. If this behavior continues, this is what's going to happen. That's very different from the child being disrespectful and then you getting so angry, you just snatch the phone out of their hand and saying, I pay the bill, I'm not going to do this anymore, right? Those are different reactions. One of those is coming from an emotional reaction, and one of those is, hey, this is the rule, this is what happens. It helps also if you establish boundaries along the way, meaning if your child is 17 and you haven't really established boundaries, you may have to go back in and kind of tell them, okay, things are about to change. Because if you switch up on somebody kind of the way things have been the whole time and you switch up on them, it's going to feel really awkward, and it may feel mean to them. Doesn't mean you're being mean, but it may feel mean to them when you switch up. So it's important, if you can, to establish boundaries early on as you're raising your children. Again, sometimes we've let some things slip, and so we have to go back in and either reestablish a boundary or establish a boundary that we didn't realize that we needed. Now, also, sometimes things happen and you don't necessarily know to establish that as a rule, right? So if your child is not typically disrespectful, if your child is not typically doing something and they do it, you can then say, hey, that's too far. We don't do that. And here is the thing. What I would say when you're talking about establishing boundaries, it's important that you can try to maintain the consequence or whatever your boundary is without you getting pulled in emotionally. What does that mean? Your child may be screaming, and I'm a parent, so I can tell you this is not always an easy task. Your child may be screaming and having a fit. And instead of you getting worked up, you go, okay, your consequence is this thing. And I don't have to get pulled into yelling back and forth with the child. Go, here's the consequence, and I'm going to maintain that, that consequence. Also, you can't control how your child perceives you, right? So what the question was, how do we do that without coming off as mean? Even if you are not being mean or not doing anything inappropriate, your child still may think it's mean. My kids have told me that I was being mean because I told them it was bedtime. There are a lot of different ways I can say it's bedtime. Guess what? If they have determined in their heart that me telling them to go to bed during bedtime is mean, that's on them. And I'm not going to lose any sleep if they think that that's being a mean mommy. Or if I say, no, you cannot have donuts for breakfast, if that's being a mean mommy, I'm okay with that, right? So sometimes you have to recognize that even you can go through all these steps and try to do it in a really positive, proactive way. Your children still may think what you're saying to them is mean. Why? Because number one, they don't know and fully understand, depending on their age, what's best for them, in the sense of, kids will think, if I want sugar for breakfast, that's what I ought to be able to have, because that's they're driven by their desires more so than what's healthy for them. So making sure that you don't get pulled into the need to be liked by your kids, that it will cause you to make poor parenting decisions. I hope that helps and answers your questions. I see a couple people joining. Again, if you're watching and you have a question and you don't want to put it in the comment section, you can send it to me on an inbox and I'll be happy to cover that. Or if you don't mind putting it in the comment section, go for it. And we're going to continue to go through this Q&A. So again, we talked about, that question was, how do you create boundaries with our children no matter the age and without coming off mean? The second question was, what are some ways that we can mind our mental health as parents? And specifically, this was a mom. So they said, as mom, what are some ways that we can mind our own mental health? The first thing I would say when you're talking about minding your own mental health is to deal with your own mental health, right? And what do I mean, deal with it? Get the counseling you need, get the coaching you need, go through and work through any past trauma, go through and process your own stuff. Because if you don't deal with your stuff, you will pass your stuff on to other generations, right? You're going to impact how you interact with your kids. So for example, if you came from a house where they didn't say I love you and they weren't affectionate, that may feel normal to you, but you also may rob your kids of doing that because you've never dealt with your own stuff, right? So the first thing is to deal with your own mental health issues. And when I say mental health issues, I don't necessarily mean that you have some diagnosis, but sometimes we do have trauma, we do have hurt, we do have disappointments that if we are not dealing with them in a healthy way, again, they will show up in our life. So make sure you deal with your own emotional issues, because you need to be healthy for yourself, for your children, for your family, for your community. You need to be healthy. And so working through that. Can I tell you that the healing process, or working on yourself, being self-reflective, being self-aware, is not always an easy process. In fact, I would dare to say it's hardly ever an easy process, but it is a worthy process, right? And so what that means is sometimes you have to look at some things that maybe you don't like about yourself. You may have to look at some things that happened to you that were very harmful, that are damaging, and never should have happened to you, right? But being able to process that in a healthy way is super important. And so I want us to be really aware of the importance of dealing with our own stuff. The next thing I would say is take care of your physical health. Sometimes, especially moms, we do a poor job of taking care of our physical health. We make sure the kids get to basketball practice. We make sure that kids go all around, and we neglect getting exercise, drinking the water, eating healthy diet. And so taking care of your physical health. Why? Because your physical health does impact your mental health. Your mental health impacts your physical health. So taking care of both of those is really key to minding your mental health. So getting the counseling, seeing somebody to address your stuff. your stuff can be a wide range of stuff, but deal with that from the emotional standpoint, but also, again, the physical standpoint, making sure that you're strong and healthy and you're getting rest at night. All of that is super important. The other thing is to find things that you genuinely like to do. If you talk to a lot of parents, they have gotten so caught up in the parenting that they literally forget to do things that they enjoy doing, right? And so the kids are in basketball and track and soccer, and the kids have a party this weekend, and the kids have this thing, and their whole life revolves around making sure that the kids are happy, that they neglect doing the things that they genuinely like to do. So I encourage you as a parent to find things that you genuinely like to do. And if you have gotten to the point where you go, I don't even really know what I genuinely like to do, that's a key. You need to stop and start taking care of yourself. That's a key. If you can't remember what you like to do, stop and figure out, what is it that brings me genuine joy and happiness. So I like to climb mountains, and I'm not talking about like scaling on the side of a mountain with a harness. I'm just talking about like hiking a regular size mountain, right? I like to do that. And so what I started to do, I noticed I was like, people in my family are super excited about doing that, but I'm gonna reach out to somebody, or I'm gonna say, hey, I still want to do that. I found time to do that last weekend because that's something that I genuinely like to do. And just because I'm a mom doesn't mean I can't do those things that I really like to do. And so making sure that you are taking care of your mental health, your physical health, and doing things that actually bring you joy. I think those are the things that help you to mind your mental health as a parent. The next question was, how would you walk someone through navigating an experience if they come in experiencing PTSD symptoms due to a traumatic racial event, such as experiencing police brutality or racism in the workplace? So when you're talking about, this is a great question. When you're talking about PTSD, understanding that it is a lot of people experience trauma. What separates when we're talking about trauma and PTSD is our brain, the traumatic brain that's experiencing PTSD is almost stopping from being able to get back to a relaxed state. And so trauma can literally change the way our brain activate or the way our brain operates. And so trauma will sometimes have you releasing more of a stress related hormone. And I don't want to get too technical, but trauma can make you start to it's really hard for your brain to kind of calm down. And so what I would do, because I do cognitive behavioral therapy, I would use trauma focused or trauma focused cognitive behavioral therapy, which is basically teaching the person about trauma, how it affects their brain, but then also helping them to go through and identify areas where they may feel shame and guilt, and have some wrong ways of thinking about the trauma, right? Or some unhealthy ways of thinking about that trauma, teaching them things to relax their physical body, because again, that brain may be producing hormones that's keeping them in an elevated state of arousal, right? Keeping their brain in a sense of stress. And so, for someone, they get stopped by the police, their heart's racing a little faster because they don't want a ticket. They don't want to have to go through that. But if someone has experienced police brutality, for example, in this question, that may really trigger a lot of stuff. Police, if you've experienced combat, if you hear fireworks, that can trigger you. There are a lot of different things that could trigger you if you've experienced trauma. And so teaching clients how to calm their physical body, how to identify healthy, irrational thoughts. Also teaching them how to not avoid. A lot of times when you're dealing with trauma, people want to avoid any triggers at all costs. They want to avoid triggers. And what I would do is help them to navigate, to learn how to be around certain triggers without it having that same effect. So an example may be if you got attacked by a big dog, and you're avoiding that dog, or you're avoiding dogs altogether, you may go, okay, I need you to start being around dogs, but this time I need you to think about how you could be safe, or to remind yourself, and how can you keep yourself calm. And so you're going to just walk them through that process. And there are a lot of other steps to that trauma-informed cognitive behavioral therapy, but basically I would walk them through those steps in helping them to regulate their thinking and to regulate their body. Long story short, and to reassess assign how that narrative plays out in their head, meaning they can't change what happened to them, but the way they see it, making sure that they're processing that in a healthy way. For example, if someone experience sexual assault, so especially when they're children, a lot of times people will internalize that and say that must have been my fault. If I wouldn't have ran through that house at 4 years old without that shirt, my uncle wouldn't have done that to me. No, that's an incorrect assumption that your uncle doing that to you was not your fault. And so challenging those irrational beliefs or those wrong beliefs, challenging those things, helping them to process in a healthy way, and then they can move forward. I hope that answered the question. Again, starting that process, though, the first step I would do is to create a safe environment for them in my office or virtually. I do my sessions now virtually, but creating an environment where I'm not judging them, where I'm not making fun of them, I'm not minimizing or belittling them. All of that, I think, is the key to the foundation of that healing process. All right. So another question we got was, it says, recently several states filed a lawsuit against Meta, claiming that its social media platforms such as Facebook and Instagram are addictive and harmful to children's mental health. What are ways that scrolling and too much time on social media affect the brain? And what are healthy ways to engage in social media to prevent or limit addictive behaviors? Again, great question. This is something that a lot of parents are now really having to see. They are really seeing the impact of not just social media, but electronics on their kids' brains. And basically, what happens, or what they've found, is that too much of the social media influence or too much of the gameplay on their devices, it activates a part of their brain which releases dopamine. And dopamine makes us feel good. It makes us happy, right? And so when that part of the brain is activated, and because something else, when especially on social media, something else is popping up, it's always giving you like another hit of dopamine, another hit of dopamine. So what happens is, if you're starting to see this is signs you can say, oh, maybe my kid's playing on this too much or doing this too much. They want to do that all the time. They get really upset when it's time to put it away. They also may not, if they find it hard to find pleasure in some of the other things that they enjoy doing. So it's like, if I can't be scrolling on Instagram, if I can't be posting on this app, if I can't be doing this, then I don't really know, what to do. Go ahead. I'm seeing people come. Go ahead and share and tag this if you're watching. If it's helping, give me some hearts, some fire. I'm checking here to make sure I don't have any additional questions. I have more questions, but I just want to make sure I'm not missing any questions if people have submitted some questions. Okay, so that is a really good thing. So how do we stop that? The first thing is to start to explain, especially when you're talking about children, to explain really what's happening. Hey, I know it seems really cool, especially though that social environment. When you get a like, that gives a sense of, woo, yes, it gives another shot of that dopamine. When you get a comment that says, "Ooh, girl, you look beautiful," another shot of dopamine, right? And so all of that can really feed into you. So what you have to do is start to limit the time that they are exposing themselves to that, and also giving them other ways to get that dopamine in healthier ways, right? Because research shows that people who spend a lot of time on social media, especially when they start getting to that addictive kind of state, what happens is their self-esteem actually can go down some. And that can be for a various number of reasons. It could be because they're comparing themselves to other people that they see on Instagram. It could also be because they are not getting that interaction, that human interaction. And so they're really relying so heavily on validation from the app to build their confidence, right? And so if they post a picture and they don't get 100 likes within a certain amount of time, they may even want to take the picture down or feel like they are ugly because that picture didn't get the response that they were wanting, and that kind of stuff. So teaching your children or teaching yourself, I can get out and do those things to feel good that don't involve social media. I can go out and I can look cute, and if nobody tells me I look good, I can look in the mirror and still feel confident about that. And so I think that's really important, that we start to limit the time, we start exploring. And then there may even, especially if you are seeing truly addictive behavior, you may have to put like filters or systems in place to stop apps that you can only be on it a certain amount of time, that you can, it gives an alarm or it shuts down a certain app after a certain amount of time, because too much of that really can overstimulate the brain, especially for young children. Their brains are still developing. And so if they're spending so much time and they're getting lit, if you think about it, those games, some of them may seem simple, but there is something going on all the time in the background, right? And so they're used to things being like, I don't have to focus on one thing because something new is going to pop up in just a moment. And so it makes it harder. Sometimes it can make it more difficult for them to focus when they're not playing the game. And what the problem with the parents will say, but I know they can't focus because they've been playing that game for 3 hours. Well, guess what? They are focusing on the game, but they've got so many things that's allowing their brain to go from this place to this place to this place. It's actually not focused on one thing. It's focused on a general, the game, but in the game, it allows their brain not to have to stay focused on one thing, if that makes any sense. And so it's important that we start to retrain our kids how to sit and be focused, right? And so how can you do that? One of the ways is to maybe sit down and say, I'm going to, for 5 minutes, this is what I want you to do. I want you to work on this and not talk or to do these things. Why? To kind of train their brains to get back to a place where it can focus for a while on extended periods of time. You're not going to go from they're struggling with focus and telling them to go and read a book for 3 hours. That's not going to work. It wouldn't even work for you. But giving them small things of like self-control and focus to help them start to rebuild that ability. Okay, great question. This question is a really good question. Again, submit your questions in the comments if you have anything, or if you have anything about a question that I've already answered. If you need further clarification, please let me know. The next one says, what advice would you give to someone in a relationship or a marriage that is clearly unhealthy and of no benefit to them, but they are afraid to walk away from the relationship out of fear of not finding someone better than they already have? I love this question. And I love this question because it's actually something that I'm seeing quite a bit in my practice. I've seen several people staying in really, really unhealthy, really, really negative relationships. And they say it's because they're so terrified of leaving the familiar. Basically, they're terrified of leaving the familiar to go to an unknown place. Now, let me say this. I am not here to advocate for people to just jump up and get divorces. I believe a lot of stuff can be worked out. And so the first thing I would say to that person is, have you gone and got some counseling as a couple? Making sure, because sometimes we call things unhealthy and toxic, and they can be, but we do that because, or it's unhealthy because people don't know healthier skills. And if you teach them, they are willing to do this. So make sure that you're going to get help from a professional that can help you navigate maybe communication or, learning and understanding each other. So the first thing I would say is try to seek counseling for the relationship. The next thing is, if one person's unwilling, get individual work, because sometimes you have to recognize your role in why you're staying, recognize your role in how things are playing out in that relationship, how you're feeding into maybe some of those unhealthy patterns, or how you're feeding into maybe some of the toxic behaviors that you're seeing. And so you want to make sure that you're doing your own work. The next part of that is to start to challenge these erroneous thoughts. A lot of people stay and they go, I don't want to get back out in the dating streets because, and I'm more so talking about a relationship that's not, where they're not married, where they go, I don't want to leave this relationship that's not going anywhere. It's not healthy. I'm not happy, but I know it's not great out there in the streets. Let's be honest. Dating in today's world is probably not the most fun experience for a lot of people, right? However, if you start to believe in this shortage mentality of there are no good, fill in the blank, men or women, everybody is this way. If you start to believe in those kind of absolute ways of thinking, you are going to limit yourself, and you're going to miss out on some things that are probably really great for you. Because just because you've met 5 guys and they weren't your mate, your partner, or 5 women that were not your partner, doesn't mean that he or she is not out there. And so you may have to be a little more patient with yourself, and also being, again, more aware of what you want and what you need, because sometimes people can be a great partner for one person and a horrible partner for somebody else, right? So it's not that everybody sucks. You have to find someone who's compatible with you. The first thing to do is make sure that you're healed, so that when you find somebody who's compatible with you, that you guys can bring that together. Compatibility is a part of it. You want to make sure that you have the same goals, right? The same values. That's super important. You don't know how many times people will come in and they realize as they have gotten real deep into the relationship that they don't even have the same values or they don't have the same vision for where they want to go in life. That's super important that you recognize those types of things. And so making sure that you don't just eliminate yourself from the dating pool because you're afraid of not finding somebody better. And I'm going to be honest, the women that I see, because all the clients I'm thinking about, they're all women, all are very, very successful. Very successful women. I mean, financially, they're good. They're beautiful women. They, all of those things. And even they're in counseling, working on themselves, right? But they still have this deep fear that not only do they fear that they won't meet anybody good, they have this fear they're going to grow old and be alone. And so they stay hostage to some really unhealthy relationships because they're so afraid of not meeting somebody. But there are some amazing people out there that are waiting, and you have to be willing to say, if I'm alone, I don't have to be miserable, because being alone is not the worst thing in the world. You can be alone and be very happy, very satisfied. How do I know? I've been not in a relationship, but I was very happy and very satisfied. So being single does not equate to being miserable, but also being in a relationship doesn't equate to being happy. How do we know? Because this question says, I'm in an unhealthy relationship and I'm scared to leave because I don't want to be unhappy. Well, you're not happy now. You might as well give yourself the freedom to be happy by yourself and to work on yourself and give yourself the opportunity to meet someone who is a better match for you. Again, if you are married, I would say go to counseling, individual and couple, depending on the circumstances. Maybe both just on GP, but making sure that you definitely spend time working on yourself. And again, if you are married and it's not working, do the work to try to fix it. Don't just accept misery. Okay, so I would say that if you're single or married, you don't have to just accept misery. Let me know if you guys have more comments or questions. The comments, let me see what are y'all thinking. Tell me if this is helping, if you have any additional questions. Let's see, we got some more questions here. At what point would someone dealing with anxiety become a serious concern to a mental health professional, where more frequent or more approaches to therapy are needed? I think that question it kind of depends, right? So at what point would you say just anxiety become a bigger issue? When it starts to be problematic for that person. For example, somebody may say, I have anxiety, but I'm able to function. I have anxiety, but I'm still able to go to work and do those things. But if you say I have anxiety and it's starting to impact me, I can't go to work anymore. I'm missing 2 to 3 days a week. Well, that's now going to impact your self confidence. That's going to impact your employment. That's going to impact your finances. So now it's becoming problematic, right? And so, or I have anxiety and I usually don't go to a lot of big events, but my child is getting married and I don't know if I can handle it through the wedding, but it's something I desperately want to make sure I can do, right? And so you want to make sure that once it starts, I think if you feel anxiety, it's okay to get help regardless, even if you feel like it's quote unquote baby anxiety or just a little bit. You don't have to try to manage those things. Go ahead and get those tools. But I would say once it starts to get in there and stop you from doing things that you need to be doing in your life, that's a clue. I need to get into mental health counseling, or I need to increase if I'm already going. Depending on kind of what style they use. I use, when we're talking about anxiety, again, I use cognitive behavioral therapy, or CBT is what it's called. I'm going to help them walk through, but depending on what that anxiety is, we may do kind of some exposure therapy, which means like if it's a phobia or something like that, we would walk them through those things. I actually had a client before where they were terrified to drive over, I think it was bridges or on the interstate, or both bridges, interstate, or something like that. And so what we started to do in the office was to have them picture driving over those things. And as they would get anxiety in the office, we would have them to calm themselves down so they could get a sense of, This is how I calm myself down in the car, right? And then we started saying, okay, I want you to drive over the shortest bridge. We'd find the shortest bridge in town and drive over this with your child or with your husband, sorry, in the seat beside you. Drive over that and keep calm and do, keep this thought pattern or say this thing to yourself. Right. And so they start doing that. Then they started driving over longer bridges. We started actually doing some exposure therapy in therapy. So we would actually go out and I would sit, I would sit in the front seat and we would drive over these short bridges. I may sit, then pretty soon I would sit in the back seat. So they would feel a sense of being by themselves in the car. They do that and I wouldn't talk. I would just be riding with them and they're walking through, those steps. And so, I think when anxiety starts to creep into your life and it's causing you to have to change the way you do things, you need to say, I need to go out and get some help. Frequency and approaches, it just depends on when you're talking about frequency. It's pretty typical for people to get therapy once a week. That's not an excessive amount of therapy. So once a week. And if you say this is getting worse or things are not getting any better, maybe you go up to twice a week. Or if you say this approach isn't working for me, your therapist will, you'll be working hopefully with a good licensed counselor, and they will say, we're not getting these results. Let's explore and look at some different options. And so making sure if you are getting counseling and you don't feel like you're getting what you need, verbalize that. You don't have to be mean to your therapist, but you can say, this doesn't seem like it's getting me what I need. Can we explore some different options? Can we look at maybe if that's different techniques? Sometimes it still could be different techniques even within their framework. And so be an active part of your treatment if you are getting mental health treatment. Again, if you guys have questions, I'm going to check here in my inbox to see if anyone has sent any additional questions. I don't see anything. Okay, so we do have another question here. What recommendations do you have for cultivating and maintaining a healthy and happy marriage? Great question. We probably could have did a whole live just on this question alone. I'm going to try not to take up all the time with this question. So what recommendations do you have with cultivating and maintaining a healthy and happy marriage? Cultivating, I think anytime you're talking about having something that's a success, you have to be intentional, right? And so when people are dating, they are typically very intentional about looking their best when they are going to see their person. They're very intentional to set up nice dates. But sometimes when you get married, we get a little more comfortable. And that's a good thing, right? Being comfortable is a good thing. But you want to make sure that you keep the intentionality every day, meaning, am I being good to my spouse? Have I asked my spouse how I'm doing? Have I asked my spouse, are there things that I can improve upon? Have I explored the strengths of our marriage with my partner? Those things are about being intentional to maintain. So I would say the first thing is about to cultivate and maintaining a healthy relationship is to be intentional and to have some way of check-ins with your partner. And again, we're talking check-ins. We're saying, hey, how am I doing with this? And here's the key. When you ask for that feedback, you have to be willing to receive that feedback. So if you ask your wife or your husband, how am I doing with filling your love tank? How am I doing with making you feel loved and wanted? How am I doing as a spouse? And they say, I don't really like when you do this. If you get defensive, they are not going to continue to share that type of information with you. If you get defensive, they're not going to want to have those conversations with you. So being open to hear some things that you could possibly improve on. So again, we talked about intentionality and having check-ins. The other thing is, no matter how good your relationship is, always work on improving your communication. Communication is how I speak, how I receive, how I give information, how I receive the information, how we talk about things, our tone of voice. So finding ways to improve your communication. I have classes on communication. I do counseling on communication, but I will tell you, so many couples still struggle with being able to communicate. A big part of the reason that people struggle with communication is because they've never done the work, the internal work, that they can communicate without everything coming through their emotional filters, right? So here's what I mean. It's hard for me to communicate that I feel scared if I don't feel safe with you. It's hard for me to communicate that I need more affection if I think you're going to say that I'm needy. So if I have to work through this need for, I don't want anybody to think I'm needy, so I can't say anything. Well, then that's an internal issue that you need to work through. This isn't about me being needy. This is saying, hey, I desire more affection. I desire more hugs. It's okay for me to share that with my partner. And so making sure that communication is really important. Also, continue to get to know and spend, as you get married, the more time you are, the more you know about your partner, right? So when you first meet someone, you're asking a lot of questions. That phase is really fun because you're like, what would you say about this? And what are your thoughts on this? And you're getting to know them. That part is really fun. But after 5, 10, 15, 20 years of marriage, you feel like you know your partner already. I already know their favorite color. I already know their favorite restaurant. I already know what makes them angry about this thing. I know their movies. I know those things. You still want to make sure that you are staying connected to the person that your partner is constantly becoming. As people, we are always evolving. Don't take for granted you know your partner without continuing to say, you know what, do you still like these things? Are these the things that still make you smile? How have you evolved? Pay attention to their evolution, right? Because if you just assume, hey, that this is the way it's always been, that's I hear this a lot with women after they've had children. Their bodies change. And so the things that may have brought them pleasure before childbirth may not still give them that same level of arousal. It's important that you don't just go, oh, I know what she likes. So boom, you go, hey, babe, how are things going in our sexual relationship? Are there things that I need to switch up? Are there things that you really enjoy? Be open for feedback. And to me, I think that's key. Being open for feedback, being willing to be open to share positive feedback. When you're giving feedback, you can do that without being critical. You can do that without nagging. I'm not talking about walking through, pointing out every negative thing that your partner does when we're talking about giving feedback. We're talking about being able to say, hey, I really love when you do that. That's feedback. Because you want to, if you every piece of feedback you give is negative, people are not going to want to hear what you have to say. So make sure that you are cultivating that positive part of feedback as well. I'm giving you, hey, girl, these greens were the best greens I've ever had. Giving that positive feedback. Also, saying, hey, when you fix that, I appreciated that. Or why? Because when you have to give the negative feedback, it's a lot easier to take when you feel that person's love tank. I don't know if you guys are familiar with the concept of a love bank or a love tank. And basically, the love bank is all about the idea of making deposits in your partner and making withdrawals from your partner. So deposits are positive things that your partner wants or needs. So if you do something for them, you are making a deposit into their love bank. If you ask something from them, you are making a withdrawal from their love bank, right? And so you have to say, am I keeping their bank full? If I'm speaking their love language, and by love language we mean acts of service, physical touch, quality time, words of affirmation, and gifts. Am I speaking what they need? If I have a person who needs to hear positive words of affirmation, do I say that? Because when I speak their language, I am filling it up. And so a lot of marriages aren't super happy or healthy because we make a lot of withdrawals and we forget to make deposits. You know what happens in the natural when you make a lot of withdrawals from your bank account and you don't make deposits. You get into the negative, which is why relationships can get into the negative, right? Because when you start getting into the negative, there's a thing called negative interpretation. Negative interpretation basically means I see something and I assume that my partner meant something negative by that. I don't give them the benefit of the doubt. And so when you start getting into the negative, you start reading into your partner's behavior as something negative. When you get into the negative bank or love bank account, you start to make negative assumptions. You start to assume, again, you just start making bad assumptions, and you don't give your partner that benefit. And so you want to make sure that you stay in the positives. That doesn't mean you can't ask for things and you can't make withdrawals. Hey, sometimes we make withdrawals without trying to. A withdrawal may mean I made a comment that my partner didn't like and it hurt their feelings. That's a withdrawal. I can't undo what I said, but what I can do is try to make sure that I fill that tank up. So they have something to replenish what I just took from them. Because we do things, you cannot live with a person and they not hurt you at some point, not long term. And we're talking marriage, we're talking about doing life together. And so if you do life with someone, there are going to be some times where they say something that hurts your feelings. There are going to be some times where they do something that you absolutely dislike. There are going to be some times where they disappoint you and you go, I can't believe you did that to me, knowing my history, or I can't believe you wouldn't do that for me, knowing how I needed this. People are people, and your spouse is no different. You're going to have some disappointments and some hurts in marriage. But again, you want to make sure that you fill that tank up. So when those bad times happen, when those withdrawals happen, that you have something that you can pull from. If I have $5 million in the bank and you need 5,000, that doesn't feel like a huge ask. But if I have $2,000 in the bank and you withdraw 5,000, not only did you take everything I had, I don't have anything to withdraw from. So if you guys have any questions about that, let me know if you have any questions about the love bank concept. So those were the things I would say when you're talking about recommending how to cultivate and maintain healthy and happy marriage. Like I said, give and receive feedback in a healthy way. Work on the communication. All of those things I think are super important when you're talking about building. And then don't forget the fun aspect. Sometimes we get married and we kind of forget that part. Make sure you are intentional. That was the first thing we said, being intentional. Be intentional about having fun and doing fun things with your spouse. Nobody, what's fun is related or relative to each couple, right? So if one couple may love going to fancy museums, and another couple may like to go hiking, and another couple may want to go dancing, that's fine. You and your partner get to decide what's fun. But making sure that you keep that aspect of fun and laughter in the relationship. The other thing is, don't lose yourself. Don't lose yourself to parenting, and don't lose yourself to your relationship. Keeping your individuality. That doesn't mean, we're not talking about being anti-God and saying two don't become one. We're talking about, who am I and what do I bring to this relationship? And we said that earlier with that parenting question. If you like to go hiking, you do that. Do the things that you need to do for you, because if you are a healthier you are going to show up in a healthier space in that marriage. Okay. So again, let me know what you guys are feeling and thinking out there. Give me some comments, any more additional questions. These are all the questions that I have that were submitted to me beforehand. But if you have any additional questions, by all means, please feel free to share that. I'm going to see, I don't see any questions in my inbox, so I'm going to give people just a few more minutes. If you have any additional questions. Next week, I want you to join us back here. Thursdays, you guys know, every Thursday at 12 p.m. Central Standard Time, we have Minding My Mental Health. Next week, I will be interviewing a police officer from the Little Rock police force, and we're talking about how police officers are taking care of their mental health, how we can work through helping and supporting our police officers and building a better relationship with our officers and the African American community. You don't want to miss it. I have Major Davis from the Little Rock Police Department, and I'm really excited about that interview. So make sure you join us back here next week. I don't see any more questions, you guys. Again, let me know if you have any additional questions. I would love to answer those before we end this. Also, I started this. Make sure, let me see if I can find it now. I'm going to go ahead and post this link. I am hosting a free webinar on November the 10th, which is a Friday evening. And we're talking about moving from surviving to thriving. And we're going to break it down, and we're going to talk about mindsets that hold us back from thriving. And so if you know that you say, I'm ready, even if you feel like you're doing good, but you want to do better, and you say, I want to see if I have any negative mindsets that may be holding me back, make sure you sign up. I'm going to put this, the link in the comment section right now. We have people signed up already, but we still have room for more. So I want to make sure that you do that. Again, it is absolutely free, so you don't have to worry about the cost associated with that, because I want to make sure that we are doing everything that we can to help people to really live their best life, right? And so if that's you and you are interested in signing up for that webinar, I'm putting it here. All right, I just put the the registration link in the comments. So if you guys want to make sure that you do that, you can make sure you go to that site, register. Again, it's free. It's going to be on a Friday night. It won't take long, about an hour, maybe an hour and a half, depending on if we have a lot of questions and that kind of stuff. But I wanted to give people some ways to help build. Again, I don't see any additional questions. So we're going to go ahead and wrap up. Make sure you sign up for the webinar. Thank you guys for joining. Next week, I do this every month. We have a Q&A. So make sure that if you have questions, submit those questions, and so I can do that at the next Q&A of next month. Thank you guys for joining me. Make sure you come right back here next Thursday at 12 p.m. Central Standard Time. Have an amazing day, and we will see you next Thursday. Bye-bye.